Hey aspirants, welcome to Insights I Can initiative. So, the first topic today would be related to governance. So, you have seen that governance is a major part of our main syllabus, and many a times questions have been coming on how to manage the resources in the country better, how to utilize the limited resources to the maximum benefits of the society. And as Indian society is coming with various vulnerabilities and inequalities, the resource allocation becomes extremely challenging, taking the colonial past and the societal structure which India has inherited during the independence time. So, this kind of articles will help us to kind of bridge the modern day technologies with the social challenges so that governance is a better experience for the public and also to the people who are part of giving this governance to the society. So, starting with the topic here, it is based on it is the idea called deploying data for better governance. So this image is representing a mixed data here which can be categorized, streamlined and structured for converting this data into information and analyzing this information for better policy making. So to start with, this whole editorial concept that had come up in Deccan Herald was focusing on data science. So, data science is a very catchy word these days. You see that Gen Z is having a lot of ideas on data science, and many of them are data scientists, which is a very booming career of late. So, what exactly is data science? Data science is a process where we study the data to extract information that we need, to extract information so that it will boost our decision making. So that is what we call data science. So which kind of information to draw from the whole lot of data and how to utilize so that the decision making is best is what we do in data science. So data science today has, kind of transformed the whole world. Big data or huge information set has creatively disrupted many works that people have been doing, and also workplaces, we must say. Hence, the suggestion of this author is that even governments across the world should begin to use this data driven tools for better public governance. So, with this, we'll start the discussion here. So, the first subtitle here was Big Data for Social Good. That is, big data or the huge repository of information that we are having today, it can help to develop scientifically effective policies so that we realize the idea of evidence based policy making. So try to use these kind of words in your answer: evidence based policy making, so that your policies are guided by evidence and not mere assumptions. Hence the policies are going to be more effective. So the author here has given the example of COVID-19 times. So during the COVID, governments across the world, they scrambled to respond to the pandemic as the decisions were to be guided by evidence, especially kind of science, that how many infections are there in an area, how many people are cured of COVID, how many areas should continue under lockdown, how many areas can be opened up. To take all these decisions across the world, the need was felt that we need a proper data set, and organization of this data is needed, and interpretation of this is also needed to take a better decision on managing the COVID. So this highlighted the need to train policymakers as well and public officials how to use data driven tools. So you can rightly give the example of COVID-19, where the need for good data, big data and its management for better decision making would be very relevant. So this concept brings forward to the idea that mainstreaming data science, that is, still now data science is the hiring that private entities have been doing, and governments still have not got the idea of how important data science is. So where exactly data science is going to be relevant, especially those government domains where there's a lot of interaction between the government officials and the general public. You can go on listing the examples like education system, where there is a lot of interaction between the government and public. We can talk about public health, where the interaction is very high. Agriculture is another sector where government public interaction is higher. And also criminal justice system. So in all this, the interaction between the public and the government is high. So government needs to keep a good repository of information in these domain. At the same time, the social scientists in the government, correct, what will be their work? The social scientists will be able to utilize this data and advise the government on better policy making, especially that the policies are fair, they are equitable, and equally accessible to everybody. So these social scientists, keeping in mind these principle, will be able to develop algorithms that will help to maximize public welfare. Correct. This model you can remember, that is which domains can rely on data science. Social scientists will help us to connect the points between fairness, equity, and the information here, and they'll create algorithms which will make public welfare a very easy dispensation. Right. So from here, we'll go to the point of how to achieve this. Now, these can be taken as suggestions. So let's say you get a question on how to improve good governance in the country, or how e-governance can become a norm for better decision making. So any reforms in the government sector, let's take for example, you get a question on health infrastructure, you get a question on boosting educational infrastructure, you get a question on eradicating poverty, food insecurity. So name any question related to governance, you can suggest these points, telling that big data and data science can play a major role in rationalizing resource utilization in the country. So the first point here would be governments must utilize open access data sets, that is those data that are already available in the free public domain. Governments can utilize them and take all this information to drive innovation in policy making. So when data is already available, governments just need to utilize it. The second one is, in the country where we face the challenges with respect to resource allocation, is that because of the structural inequality. So structural inequality of the society, to be specific, where casteism takes a major root in resource allocation. So you know that caste and class play a major role in where we live, what our educational qualifications are, what is our access to healthcare, the ownership of resources. All these factors that Indians today are living in is mainly determined by the caste, and then comes the role of class. So when we have a better data set with us, we can make rational use of this data and reduce the inequality in resource allocation, especially that is influenced by the caste system of the country. The third utilization would be equitable resource allocation. Though it looks very similar to the above, it is very different, with the idea that resource allocation can be optimized by using data science, because we have limited resources, correct? That is the biggest problem of the economies: limited resources but unlimited wants. So what data sets will help us to do is, it will help us to allocate resources to those sections of the society that need it the most, without any kind of bias that the upper column we were talking about. And the other major challenges the developing economies face today is the supply and demand mismatch. So all the time this demand is very much high compared to the supply of resources. So data science again will help us unlock new values, and this will help that when we use the data system, which people need the exact data, exact resources, how much they will be needing it, what is the time that they will be needing it, these decisions will be extremely easy when we streamline the data in a governed manner. So how to use this in your answers, we have already seen. It can be used in GS paper 2 specifically by telling that in healthcare in education sector, especially to avail equitable education, in reducing poverty, in allocation of resources by the government end. So in all these questions, you get any open-ended questions on this, you can give a suggestion that data science needs to be a part of modern day governance to ensure evidence based decision making. Remember this EBDM, it's going to make your answers very effective, because without evidence or without data, any of our decisions are going to be half-hearted efforts towards achieving the success. Second article for today's discussion is related to women and climate change, as you would have seen it in the thumbnail. So, women and climate change, the idea that comes to your mind is women are either victims of climate change, because we usually categorize women as vulnerable sections and tell that women need extra protection to escape the vagaries of climate change, or we either consider women to be saviors or the mothers who can protect the world from the negative impact of climate change or prevent misuse of resources, to be specific. So when we talk about this idea of a woman as a savior or a victim of climate change, this article, though it looks like it is a lot having to do with the environment perspective, this article is mainly towards the gender identity, and this is more relevant in our GS paper 1 than in our GS paper 3. So when we have seen that women are saviors or victims, have we ever asked the question why? Why have the women today become vulnerable sections? Why have they become victims? Or even if not that, on a positive note, why have they been called the saviors? So when you put the question why, this whole debate or this whole article is explaining that why part and telling that this is nothing but an extension of the stereotypes related to women. So remember to utilize this article in GS paper 1 majorly, and also various essays that come up with respect to women and gender roles in the society. So coming to the topic of stereotypes here. So if you see here, there are various stereotypes of women in the climate literature. Okay, one is that they are saviors. So what is the meaning here? Those who protect the nature. The other idea is that they are victims, as we have just discussed, that is, they are more vulnerable to climate induced disasters. So, both of this actually overlook the power dynamics in the society. Power dynamics that are shaped mainly by the patriarchal idea, the dynamics and the structural factors that actually give birth to these kind of stereotypes. So this analysis in the article helps us to build a sustainable economy that do not reproduce gender injustices, right? So though we tell women as a savior, it is nothing but a stereotype. So we'll analyze both these concepts individually to give you an idea of why it is a stereotype and not a great credit given to the women, or a kind of best idea that they are victims, let us protect them. So if you take women as a savior, so this idea revolves around the role of women in unpaid care work. So women's work usually is in the care sector, taking care of the children in the house, taking care of everybody in the household, fetching water for them from long distance, cooking food in the house. Even if not that, organizing work in the house is again a woman does. So this idea of unpaid care and work is and it is directly, this concept is related to the stake in preserving natural resources. So as a result, what happens, women do not get equal opportunity to make a living. So because of this household activities, they do not get a better economic opportunity where they also can go and make a living for themselves. So let us analyze how these inequalities play out among different social groups. Let's take the idea of a rich or an affluent woman, or a woman who is rich. right? So in this kind of societies or rich women, they usually outsource this unpaid care duties to some paid women workers, some house help. So these workers are usually from the poorer sections, or often from the marginalized households. So the more affluent women do not if you see, these affluent women, are they called as the saviors of nature? Definitely not. Who are called saviors? Those from the unpaid sectors of the economy. By contrast, let's say why these women are called as saviors and not those from the rich and affluent households, because the women from low income community, they perform labor intensive activities. So where lot of human labor is involved, let's say fetching firewood, water, they have less employment opportunities than men. So they are forced to take in occupations in the rural areas like rearing animals, growing crops, working as agricultural laborers. So take all these occupations, they're nothing but based on natural resources. So the greater reliance on natural resources explains why these women have a greater stake in their story of preservation. So as a result, women in the global south or the poorer sections of the world, their major occupation is what? Agricultural labor, animal rearing, growing crops. And these are the people, women, who are considered that they are the saviors of the earth. What is the reason? They have the least carbon footprint, and they are having to take the idea that we need to be the saviors. So why this is wrong? Women as saviors, why is this as a question? Because before calling them as saviors, do these roles reflect personal agency? That is, are women working as agricultural laborers by choice? Are they working as domestic workers in others' home by choice? Or are they grazing animals by choice? The answer is no. They have been as pushed into the sectors because they don't have any other opportunity. And as the society has pushed them into their sectors, now the society celebrates telling you are the ones who are going to save the nature. So it is nothing but a deepened idea of stereotype. The other question is, do they really have affinity towards nature to be calling them as saviors? Is this affinity one that has come out with affection, or is it just because an economic necessity, or simply because they lack any other options? Correct? So because of all these reasons, it is told that women as a savior is not a glorified term, it is just a stereotype as per this author's discussion. Next, coming to the concept of women as victims of climate change. Why they are called victims? Because they are more vulnerable to the disasters, they are less capable of adaptive responses. Let's say the idea that all women are same is very flawed here, because women differ from classes, their identity, their location, everywhere they're changing. At the same time, why women are considered victim is because of a socially constructed gender roles that women are forced into. Correct? So they are disadvantaged in the face of extreme weather events. The author here gave the example of 2004 tsunami, where more than 60% of the casualties, or death, not 60, it is more than 70% of deaths were women. So who are these women? Those who were indoors and those who were taking care of the children in the household. It was these women who died in large number. At the same time, when there is a disaster, or when there are, let's say, extreme weather events, women do not know how to climb trees because they are never taught to. They are never taught how to swim in the water so that they can save their life. So of course they are going to be victims of climate change. So women's care responsibilities, they amplify their climate vulnerability. So resource scarcity lengthens their journey to collect water and firewood again. So all this role that women have been playing traditionally is what has made them vulnerable. So is it the mistake of a woman to become a victim, or is it the social stereotype, or is it the social construct that has made a woman victim is a question here. So do remember this analysis. It will help you a lot in GS paper 1, because when you get the topic of gender stereotype in paper 1 or even in paper 4, the idea is that women in science and technology, women cannot drive, women are poor decision makers. These kind of stereotypes are very common. But utilizing the idea that women are victims of climate change, women are saviors of climate change, so this will give you a fresh perspective in the same old topic of gender stereotyping. So what is the answer for these kind of questions now? The answers lies in the fact that if we avert the factors that give rise to these, we can easily solve this problem. So despite these barriers, women continue to take primary responsibility with respect to climate change. You have seen that India's Chipko movement and Narmada Bachao Andolan, all these are activities which are closely held by women. Or we can see that recently the Hargilla army in the state of Assam to protect the greater adjutant stroke. All these are the movement led by women. There is no doubt in it. At the same time, in the international level, Green Belt movement by women of Kenya, they have led environment resistant movements very strongly. So if we organize production properly, that is production processes, if we think reorganize reproduction ideas, if we integrate care economy equitably between the male and the female, definitely we can reconcile the idea of climate justice with gender and economic justice. So these stereotypes would end. So we have to re-verify the three concepts of production, reproduction, and care, so that we integrate climate justice with gender and economic justice. So with this, utilization of this science topic would be clear to you. It is in paper 1, women and women issues, GS paper 4, stereotypes as a topic, and in essays related to climate change and women, this topic would be relevant. So kindly make notes of it based on various contexts in the 4 different papers. So the third article is a very interesting one. This is the heading that Deccan Herald has given on a report that report by an organization called Oxfam. So Oxfam every year releases World Inequality Report on the first day of World Economic Forum's meeting in Davos, Switzerland. So this year the report had a very interesting fact. What is that fact? You can use this as a very good beginning for any questions on inequality and injustice in the world. So what is the idea? This time the report was based on colonialism and the stuff. So enough money to carpet London. So UK's richest 10% extracted $33.8 trillion from India during the colonialism, says study. So enough money to carpet London. It is not about the wood or the cloth carpet we are talking about. The currency notes. If you lay the currency notes that UK has looted from India, entire London could have been carpeted with these notes in 3 layers. So imagine the amount of money that went from India to UK through the whole process of colonialism in the entire years of colonial history that India has had with Britain. So this was the heading that I have picked up from Deccan Herald, but the entire discussion is based on an article written by Mr. Amitabh Beher, who is the executive director of Oxfam International, the same organization that has released the report. So the name of the report this time is Takers, Not Makers. Right? It is about the colonial masters. So this whole article started with a major question, that is, what ails our world? So when you get this question, what is the idea here? What ails our world? What is the problem our world is facing? The root cause, according to this author, is that the inequality of our rigged economic system. So why is this economic system rigged? Because it has been deliberately designed to enrich a wealthy elite at the expense of ordinary people. Right? So remember this, the whole reason for inequality in the world is because of the rigged economic system that is deliberately structured in such a way that the rich are benefited at the cost of ordinary people. So the Oxfam's new report, that is Takers Not Makers, it has given us some statistics. Okay, what are these statistics? The statistics tells that, you can note this down, they'll be very informative to use in your essays especially. The statistics tells that in the year 2024, the billionaires wealth has increased 3 times faster than the increase observed in 2023. If this is one part, in the year 2024, 204 new billionaires have been added to the list. Okay, 2.4 billionaires have been added at the rate of 4 new billionaires per week. So this is the way the world is becoming richer. Nothing wrong in it, because we have a perception that perception which the author calls here myth, that is true origins of billionaire wealth. So when we see that there is a growth and new people are becoming billionaires, it's a proud thing for the world, because our economy is growing despite the challenges of climate change, COVID pandemic happened, and the unstable world relations that are in place. So why we are quite positive on this is that because there's a perception that this extraordinary wealth is a result of talent. People who are talented, they are coming out with great ideas and creating fortunes for themselves and the whole world. There is nothing wrong in it, and this whole empire is built on hard work of these people who have become billionaires, and hence it strengthened the idea of meritocracy. So this is the belief, so everything is fine. But this whole article tells that whatever perceptions we have, that these people have become rich on the talent, on their fortunes they have created, is based on their hard work and it is pure merit that wins, it is wrong. It is a myth. So the recent report tells that these billionaires have a different origin. Okay, and slowly the reality is busted in two basic ideas. So what are they? The first idea is that the new oligarchy, okay, that is the new people who have become rich, they are called new oligarchy. So this new oligarchy is fueled by how they have become rich. They are becoming rich because of the inherited wealth that they have got from their ancestors, plus they are the monopoly in their own sectors. So when they are monopoly, of course they are going to grow rich, and because of this they have accumulated a lot of wealth with them. And if you see, 60% of the billionaire wealth is inherited or because of the monopoly. So what has happened as a result of this is that, especially this is telling the example of this first world countries or global north countries, where the rich colonial masters who have got their money from the back time, they all have generated wealth based on what their forefathers have created. So if we are telling that it is the talent, hard work, meritocracy is taking the advantage, no, it is wrong. It is based on inherited wealth. So already when you have a property, it's very easy to start off from there, and success is definitely sure shot. So it's not either talent or anything else, but the inherent wealth that has helped them to grow even higher. So this is one idea of countering the myth. The second idea that the author discussed here is about the negative impacts of colonialization. Okay, this is very, very relevant for modern Indian history, and also consolidation part, that is post independence part. So this whole colonialization has kind of cast a shadow on the developing world or global south, we can talk. So how did colonial masters succeed in their ideas? Based on exploitation. Remember these terms: exploitation, it was based on violence, It was based on the concept of racism, telling it is the burden of the white man to develop and civilize the Eastern world, and domination, economic, social domination on the colonialized people. So, this concept today is being called as billionaire colonialism. Colonialism, remember to use this term. So these countries that have become rich based on the colonial wealth are today more powerful because of the riches they have taken and plundered from the developed world. So as it is seen in the title of this article itself, the money was enough to carpet London with 3 layers. So imagine the kind of wealth they have been boosting on. So from back then even to the present day, the flow of money, the flow of resources has been from the poorer countries to the richer countries, from the global south to the global north. So it should have been the other way around, in fact, but that has not happened. So for every $1 that the rich countries give to the poor, indirectly the poorer countries pay $4. So who is getting the net advantage here? It is the developed country. So because of this idea that is being perceived, the whole world is becoming so, we can say, biased, that the rich are becoming the richest and the poor are becoming poorer. So what is the call of action that the author talks about here is delivering on a just, sustainable future for all. So this is a kind of suggestion given by the author. You can quote them one by one. So how can we bring a change? By giving a call of action, by changing how we manage our economies. As we have seen, the economic system is only flawed, so we need to manage our economies. To do this, we must close the gap between the north and south and the rich and poor. So how do we go about this? The first advice given by the author here is about governments must set global and national goals. Global and national goals to reduce inequalities. Let's say the governments must aim that the total income of the richest 10% in a country should not be more than the 40% income of the remaining part of the people. So if this is kept in mind, the inequality will definitely not be existing. The second advice given is that the former colonial powers need to acknowledge the disadvantages they have created to the global south and formally apologize. So they have to offer repatriations to the victim nations to ensure that the restitute justice is achieved, and the compensation they have to pay for the damages they have created, so that the countries can rehabilitate themselves, right? So this is a suggestion given that colonial masters should own the responsibility. The third one is we need to end outdated systems or outdated structures or organization. Yes, you have rightly thought, it is nothing but the organizations of the UN, IMF, World Bank, and the likes, which have created divisions and are no longer relevant to the current times. So these organizations should be reformed to ensure equitable representation. So the system can promote economic sovereignty over all the governments. So the author suggests something called UN tax convention, where rich countries will make the payment to the poorer countries through the UN tax, and the resources can be better channelized. At the same time, the global south should organize themselves into groups, alliances, where they will focus on mutual beneficial exchanges and promote economic independence. So because of this economic independence of global south, their dependence on global north will be reduced when the inequality will be abolished. So what should be the crux of the whole world system now? To focus or to target that people can live a free, equal, and dignified life. So if you would think where this topic is relevant, you can go back to the previous year essay questions of UPSC and see that there was a question called a society that has more justice is a society that needs less charity. So whatever we have discussed here as solution, if this is implemented, we will definitely not have a concept called as charity, because already there is justice existing in the society. So utilize this information, or how beautifully the author has told that the money is sufficient to carpet London. So these kind of phrases will definitely draw the attention of the evaluators, and definitely will be a unique way of representing how unequal the world systems today have been, and colonialism has not ended, but it has taken a new shape of billionaire colonialism. So utilize these words in your answer to make them more powerful. So the next article is a small example to give in your GS paper 4 in the topic of compassion. So there is a new shop for compassion, first of its kind thrift store opened in Kerala's Kozhikode city. So what is the story here? If you recall, many of us, what is the idea of thrift? If you want to check, many of us, since our childhood, we would have our siblings or distant relatives who would have told that these clothes do not fit me, so why don't you wear it as you're younger to me? So instead of giving it off or wasting the clothes, we have always, if you recall, we would have experienced that we have worn the clothes of our siblings with so much of affection that yes, it's my sister's or brother's clothes. So this is what is the meaning of thrift, where one person would have used the particular item for a few times and would have not like to continue using it, and donates it to other people. So though this concept is quite familiar to the Indians, the idea of thrift store or a shop where the second-hand goods are, with keeping in mind all the hygiene and other ideas, the second-hand store is not so popular. So this concept of thrift store has started in Kozhikode now, where the profits coming out of this thrift store is dedicated to the upliftment of underprivileged people or underprivileged initiatives across the Malabar region. So all the profits will go to organizations and individuals in need. So remember the concept of thrift. So if you recall, cloths and products, cloths, especially the textiles, they are manufactured in large extent owing to the idea of consumerism that the world presently is living in. Though you don't have the necessity to buy so many clothes, the marketing techniques, the sale, Republic Day sale is quite popular now. So all these sale manipulates the thought process of a person and convinces them to buy more goods. So what to do with the extra products here? They either end up in the landfills or have no usage. So related to this textile waste itself, in our previous episode we have covered the idea of the good doll. So two more initiatives we'll discuss today related to the textile waste itself, so you can group them under solid waste management. So here the idea of thrift store also is based on reusing or sustainable usage of textiles. So there are mainly 5 sources from where this compassion shop is getting its cloths or other artifacts from. They also sell antique products as well. So many of the people donate. So donations by individuals, cloths, artifacts, used household products like lanterns which have antique values, individuals donate it. Many shops also donate. Donation by shops is the second idea here. Then many of the products that are handmade by persons with disabilities, they are also purchased by this compassion shop and put for sale. Many a times the home linen materials or home linen products by large scale manufacturers, they are also sold in this shop, and some products are manufactured under their own brand name. So these 5 types of goods are put for sale here. And what is the major motive of this? One is to create opportunities for local women. The first one. Second one is to encourage sustainable shopping experience to the people. So with this two concept, the idea of compassion shop is taking head in Kozhikode, and they are getting good response from the public as well. The underline or the main idea that they want to promote here is kindness, because you are going to purchase from this shop because it's going to help a social cause. It is sustainable because we are talking about recycling of textiles, and it is also talking about togetherness, that is prospering together. So definitely these kind of example would boost the sustainable development goals of the country and inbuilt an idea of compassion. So where it will be relevant, you can give this as an example for GS paper 2, governance. It would be relevant in GS paper 3, conservation topic, where you literally talk about reduce, reuse and recycle concept. GS paper 4, where the idea of compassionate society can be shown by shops like this, where the profits will go to the underprivileged sections of the society. So just to help them, many people come and buy the products, which definitely loops in the whole concept of compassion and responsible usage of resources. So the last topic for today is a very optimistic story from the heritage city of Banaras. So it is about the IAS officer called Akshat Verma, who has become nothing but a role model bureaucrat for us. So he has made a brilliant idea for clothes donated to Ganga in the city of Varanasi. So if you see Varanasi or Benares goes as its traditional name goes, so if you see, there's a traditional practice that the pilgrims who goes to Benares, they usually donate the cloths that they have worn for many spiritual, or we can say for many ritualistic practices. So the major problem with these cloths was that it made solid waste management very difficult. Big, and many a times the cows and other stray animals also started eating the discarded cloths. At the same time, it would make the area very unpleasing in appearance. It would spoil the aesthetics of the area. So what is the simple solution that Mr. Akshat Verma has brought in here is, he has roped in Hope Foundation's Green Army. So what is done here, Hope Foundation volunteers try to collect the waste, or the cloths that is discarded everywhere in the city, and once it is collected, it is organized and sent to the Green Army. So Green Army is a band of women in the Banaras city, where they know how to stitch the cloths. So these waste cloths that are discarded are washed, then they are sanitized, and women are trained to stitch cloth bags out of it. So once the cloth bags are stitched, they are freely distributed to local vendors. So what is the advantage here? One, there are many solutions coming out of here. First is the solid waste is managed, solid waste of cloth is managed. Second is women are getting employment opportunities. The third is less usage of plastic bags. So one initiative, three advantages were given here. So these plastics bags, when they were freely distributed, this initiative started from December 2023, and already 1 lakh cloth bags have been made and distributed to the local vendors, so that they give these bags instead of plastic cover to the people. So the three target approach to manage solid waste is done here. So these are some unique ideas that have been put forward by our bureaucrats, so that solid waste is not an area where we are lagging behind. So there are many concepts under Swachh Bharat mission, that we need to keep our city clean, we need to manage our waste better, we need to segregate the waste. So when there is a proper dedication by officers, all this is nothing but a cakewalk. The only thing that is needed is proper will and the organization of idea. So where will you use this? As always in GS paper 3, conservation or solid waste management. In GS paper 4, the idea of Mr. Akshat Verma is a very good example of a role model bureaucrat whose initiatives has made so much of difference that it is making the whole heritage city very clean in appearance and very just in its environment consciousness. So try to note this down for your GS paper 4 and 3 to give some unique examples in your answers. So thank you for watching the episode. Stay with us for many such informative content.